Alliance Evolutions Over the Course of Short-Term Dynamic Psychotherapy, a Case Study. By Luc Michel, Ueli Kramer, and Yves de Roten. Part 3. Discussion. Using session notes as a basis, it was possible to divide the entire psychotherapy into 4 main phases. The confrontation between this model of clinical comprehension with the various measures of the process suggests the following findings. First, it is important to note that the alliance is generally positive and follows a positive trend. The patient and the therapist evaluate the alliance as increasing in strength during the process, which reflects the positive atmosphere in which the psychotherapy took place and which no doubt benefited the treatment. This corresponds to the positive correlation found on the overall sample between the evolution of the alliance and therapeutic success. Kramer et al., 2009. The alliance rated by the therapist is generally slightly below the patient's rating, as observed in previous studies. Fitzpatrick et al., 2005. Kramer et al., 2008. Moreover, the therapist's alliance evolution presents fewer fluctuations. Therefore, we based our interpretation on the patient's evolution of alliance only. We should state once again that the patient did not present any psychiatric diagnoses, and global severity index, general symptomatology, was in a normal range at intake, during therapy, at discharge, and at 12-month follow-up. Therefore, we do not discuss the therapeutic outcome. Nevertheless, based on the process information, we may conclude that the outcome of the psychotherapy was highly positive from both the therapist's and the client's perspectives, as well as the research team's perspective. Second, we observe that the alliance assessed by the patient and the nature of the transference, as assessed by the therapist, co-vary with the 4 main phases of the therapeutic process. Phase 1. The therapeutic alliance, assessed by the patient, lessens and the transference becomes more and more maternal. Phase 2. The alliance tends to increase in a linear manner and transference changes from the maternal pole to the paternal pole. Phase 3. Both measures show more instability. The alliance lessens, then increases, rupture, resolution process, whereas the transference varies while remaining in a paternal pole. Phase 4. The alliance shows a more marked episode of diminishing, then returns to the average, rupture resolution, whereas the transference once again passes from the maternal pole to the paternal pole and reaches the same level as at the beginning of the therapy. The evolution of the alliance, as assessed by the therapist, together with the valence of the transference, seem less sensitive to the different phases of the process described by the therapist. The latter alliance tends to increase more or less linearly throughout the treatment, but with a decrease that reflects that of the patient during the end of treatment phase. As for the transference valence, this remains relatively stable throughout the therapy. Even if we refer to 3 separate components of the therapeutic relationship that are the real relationship, the therapeutic alliance, and the transference-countertransference, according to the model proposed by Gelso and Carter, 1994, which occur simultaneously and interact in a complex manner, the nature and the role of each in psychodynamic psychotherapy has been a controversial issue. Our observations on the case of Julia show that at least 2 out of 3 phenomena measured co-vary to a certain extent, without overlapping completely. The link between clinical work and psychotherapy research is complex. It remains difficult to establish meaningful bridges between what happens clinically in the therapeutic process and the empirical data stemming from questionnaires or rating scales. 2 visions which, by analogy with the human sight, need a chiasm to allow them to benefit one another and to lead to the beginnings of binocular vision. The comparison of the alliance and transference measures with the clinical material of the sessions in this case study show that more regressive material and the use of more regressive defense mechanisms are associated to a maternal polarization of the transference. We hypothesize that the clinician does not examine the details of the defense mechanisms during the session, as done by the defense mechanisms rating scales, based on the session transcript, but intuitively builds up a gestalt of the individual's whole defensive organization. It is this gestalt the therapist is working with and reacting to in terms of his countertransference. We hypothesize that the rupture sessions, the patient's most regressed position in terms of defenses and conflicts, may be described as a transference crisis within the therapy, which at the same time opens up to the core interpersonal problem in the patient. Safran, 1993. Finally, the resolution sessions may represent the resolution of this transference crisis if done in a constructive manner, by enabling the patient to make a corrective emotional experience. The positive outcome of the entire psychotherapy with Julia makes us suppose that this corrective emotional experience took place at least twice, during sessions 6 and 23, during the therapeutic process. When and how did the clinical change take place? In the case of Julia, the psychotherapist describes in his clinical narration what he observed throughout the sessions. In particular, he noted certain moments he found to be crucial. These are the sessions where the psychotherapist thinks that his patient is undergoing a psychic change, which corresponds to what is commonly called insight in psychotherapy research. The following conversation from the 15th session is a good example. Julia talks a lot about the activities she shares with her father, then about her boss's publications, in which she collaborates. She talks about her fear of being judged, her fear of others' regard, and the effort she makes to satisfy him by remaining amenable, even if sometimes her true feelings are very different. The psychotherapist points out that it seems that she has to behave well to make the men in her life love her. The patient continues to talk, seemingly untouched by this comment, then, suddenly, wonders why she never weeps in the psychotherapy sessions, whereas elsewhere, for no reason whatsoever, she does. The psychotherapist suggests that here she retains her tears, just as she used to retain them when she was with her father, for fear of disappointing him and not being loved. Deeply moved, she recalls memories involving her Nordic, cold father, memories in which she prevented herself from expressing her emotions. Bringing the patient's infantile conflictuality into the HAq-II nunc and into the transference is interpreted. In some ways, this is a deconstruction followed by a reconstruction of the link between the affect representation and the word representation. Such moments of insight are to be paralleled to what the Boston group describes as moments of meeting, which, in its view, is the crux of the change process, Stern, 2004. According to this group of authors, however, these moments of meeting would not seem directly linked to the verbal material, but rather part of the wider context of the interpersonal encounter between the patient and the therapist, including affective and nonverbal markers. How can these changes be objectively looked at? A metaphor may be used. A seismograph records an earthquake as the Earth's crust feels it. Such a shock is also perceived by a human observer if it is sufficiently strong. However, if it is only slight or the movement extends over a long lapse of time, it is usually ignored. The use of a seismograph allows the movement to be measured objectively and examined in more detail. By analogy, we can query whether what the psychotherapist calls a change can be seen objectively when measures such as ours are applied. So, are the movements described by the clinician in his narration truly objective with the help of repeated measures? That definitely produce evidence of a process underway. Certain connections could thus be made between the process and insight. To continue with our analogy, it is certain that advances made in seismography have allowed us not only to witness what is happening, but also to forecast future events. Several research implications ensue from the present case study. The use of self-reported and observer-rated process information over the course of psychotherapy in order to inform about the client's process may be used in different treatment modalities and therapeutic approaches. We think it is particularly useful to monitor the alliance evolution session by session and link this information to the clinical evolution of the case. More studies in this field might enhance the collaboration between psychotherapy researchers and clinicians and inform about the how of specific psychotherapy processes. It would also be interesting to apply such a methodology to bad outcome cases where process information would be particularly helpful.